Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 29th of November, 2023, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, Charles Malet. Welcome to the programme. First time in the studio, Charles.
Thank you very much, Mike. Good afternoon to you all.
And Vanessa joining us from Damascus, as usual. So we will get straight on, Vanessa, then. This is the 29th of November, as I just said, and that means it is International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people.
Yep, so I thought that was worth reminding people of, at least if you can fly a Palestinian flag from somewhere on your apartment or house, that would be really cool. So I was just going to cover a number of things to give a kind of general summary of what's going on. Of course, we've been seeing the hostage and prisoner release by Israel and by Hamas. This is, I think, figures from Euromed Monitor, day 49, 20,031 dead, 18,690 civilians, 4,112 women, and of course the awful figure of 8,176 children, and bodies still being found during the ceasefire, which I believe is supposed to end tonight, but may, of course, be extended. So I'm going to focus on a couple of reports. First of all, from Euromed Human Rights Monitor. I do recommend that people follow them. They're producing new reports on an almost daily basis. So this one caught my eye. International Committee must investigate Israel's holding of dead bodies in Gaza. So what's this about? Bearing in mind that the White Helmet organization established by MI6 and CIA inside Syria to work alongside Al-Qaeda has also not only been supported by Israel, but has been accused of organ trafficking amongst the Syrian civilian captives. So Euromed Monitor has documented the Israeli army's confiscation of dozens of dead bodies from Al-Shifa medical complex and the Indonesian hospital in the northern Gaza Strip, and others from the vicinity of the so-called Safe Corridor, Salah al-Din Road, designated for displaced people heading to the central and southern parts of the Strip. Of course, those people were regularly bombed, shelled, and shot by the Israeli forces. According to Euromed Monitor, the Israeli army also dug up and confiscated the bodies from a mass grave that was established more than 10 days ago in one of the Al-Shifa medical complex's courtyard. So what does Euromed Monitor suspect is going on? They continue in the report. You can read the full report, obviously. Medical staff in Gaza found evidence of organ theft in bodies returned by the IOF. Israel, of course, has a long history of holding onto the bodies of dead Palestinians, including children. Euromed Monitor is sad as it holds the remains of at least 145 Palestinians in its morgues and approximately 255 in its Numbers cemetery, which is near the Jordanian border and off-limits to the public, in addition to 75 missing people who have not even been identified by Israel. Added to that, Euromed Monitor also reported on the horrific scenes unfolding in UN-run shelters for displaced people in Gaza, which is the next slide, Mike. Sorry. The accusation, actually, that is coming from Euromed Monitor is quite interesting. It's basically intimating that organizations like the UN agencies, particularly UNRWA, and the Red Cross all have a responsibility and are considered to some degree to be complicit with the Israeli agenda to ethnically cleanse Gaza. Why? Because they basically evacuated all of their centers in the north and central Gaza, leaving people stranded and living in appalling conditions. Now, I also wanted to look at Elon Musk's recent visit to Israel in the last few days, how it's being reported in Israeli media, particularly what is considered kind of left-wing media. Israel's repulsive embrace of Elon Musk is a cynical portrayal of Jews dead and alive. They're referring to the fact that they believe that he doesn't censor Twitter enough for pro-Palestinian voices. Hamas actually invited Elon Musk to come to Gaza as part of his visit. Hamas senior official Osama Hamdan invited US billionaire Elon Musk on Tuesday to visit Gaza to see the extent of destruction caused by the Israeli offensive. There was also a fairly extensive Twitter or X media campaign ongoing to try and persuade Musk to go to Gaza. I also wanted to point out that he has kind of slightly pushed back against pro-Palestinian tweets saying, as I said earlier this week, decolonization or from the river to the sea and similar euphemism necessarily imply genocide. Interesting statement from Musk. Clear calls for extreme violence are against our terms of service and will result in suspension. But let's have a look at who started the term from river to the nation. It's to confront Israel's version of from the river to the sea. And of course, this was actually put out by the Likud party platform in 1977, the time when the settlements were being established basically by Ariel Sharon to basically prevent the establishment of any Palestinian state then or in the future. And the statement was, the right of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is eternal and indisputable. Therefore, Judea and Samaria will not be handed to any foreign administration. Between the sea and the Jordan, there will be only Israeli sovereignty. So perhaps just a little bit of context for Elon Musk there. And what I would end with was a very short clip of Elon Musk's statement after his meeting with Netanyahu and various officials and his visit to the alleged site of the Hamas atrocities. If you can roll the video.
It was certainly been a day, I would say an emotionally difficult day to see the places where people were murdered. I just did a talk with the Prime Minister, and I think obviously there are three things that need to happen in the Gaza situation. I mean, there's no choice but to kill those who insist on murdering civilians. There's no choice. They're not going to change their mind. And then the second thing is to change the education so that a new generation of murderers is not trained to be murderers. And then the third thing, which is also very important, is to try to build prosperity.
So basically kill them, and once you've killed as many as possible, you should reprogram those that are left, and then you should benefit from the prosperity of the resources belonging to Gaza and to Palestine, which I will come on to in more detail in my next section.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Vanessa. Now, Charles, coming back to the UK, but a related topic, what's going on with fundraising for Gaza?
Well, Mike, thanks. As you say, a related topic, and I will deal with the humanitarian response. We've heard a lot about military action, but not so much about the humanitarian response, plenty about the disaster side of it, but not necessarily what's happening and where the money might be coming from and going to. So to set the scene, the Disasters Emergency Committee, which you may be aware of, is essentially a coordinating facility for 15 other British-based charities, and it makes sure that it concerts the effort together in order to put forward an appeal for a specific cause. So just a bit of context, we'll look at an appeal they ran in 2014 for Gaza. So what, though, is the situation now? Are they doing anything with regards to Gaza? And it appears not. They say that they're deeply concerned for the safety and well-being of civilians, and that they're closely monitoring the rapidly deteriorating humanitarian situation. So they have criteria for launching a DEC appeal. So what we'll do is we'll just have a look at the criteria that they use. And these three are The disaster must be on such a scale and of such urgency as to call for swift international humanitarian assistance. Well, that certainly seems to be fulfilled. The member charities, or some of them, must be in a position to provide effective and swift humanitarian assistance at a scale to justify a national appeal. We'll come back to that. And thirdly, there must be reasonable grounds for concluding that a public appeal would be successful. So in a sense, what is the mood of the public? Now, what is notable here is that of the 15 charities that the DEC coordinates, 13 of them have in fact launched appeals. So either they conclude that they are able to deliver aid on the ground, or that there is sufficient public support, or both. So just to get an idea of that, we'll have a look at the Red Cross first of all, who say of the current situation that more than 10,000 people, including children, have been killed in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory, and over 30,000 injured. That sets the scene for them to go on and launch their own appeal, to invite people to help provide vital aid and to donate it now. And then another DEC charity, which is Oxfam, has its own crisis appeal. So that's the charity side of it. And in a sense, they are giving the impression that they believe they are able to deliver aid. We'll then look at the British government and see what they have to say, which again is in actual fact to say that they also believe that they can deliver the aid. They've committed £10 million in humanitarian aid for civilians in the occupied Palestinian territories, although critically within the text that they put underneath that, they say that all UK aid funding to the OPTs undergoes rigorous oversight and no funding goes to Hamas. Well, they state that with some certainty, and that is something that we will come back to. Now, for many viewers and listeners, this might not mean very much in the context of the overall workings of the DEC. So just to set the scene for contemporary appeals, I thought we'd take a look at Ukraine and see what exactly has been happening there. So the first and very immediate comparison to make, not that I would seek to overlay one situation on top of the other, because I don't think that's a fair thing to do, but the DEC launched an appeal in Ukraine 1 week after the conflict began. Of course, it's now 8 weeks since the current escalation of the situation in the Middle East. Critical from the Ukraine appeal is the detail that 47% of expenditure was on direct cash payments to aid recipients. So assuming that to be an approximate figure for charities engaging in such activities, it's a wonder that the government can say that they can be certain that no money at all will go to Hamas, or indeed to anywhere that it's not intended. So into the detail of the humanitarian appeal in Ukraine, outlined in the red text there, you can just see that the figures for Ukraine are well above those of any of the other appeals running concurrently. The other thing to point out is that whilst the Charity Commission, which oversees all of this, is very strong on regulatory detail with regard to fundraising, it gives very little guidance on how that money may be spent. And the industry statistics suggest that in the region of 60 to 70% of overall funds are spent on charitable activities, which leaves, of course, a significant amount of money to be spent not on charitable activities. And just to highlight the point, I'll finish off with a news story put on by the Daily Mail from this week, which shows that Oxfam have spent £340,000 a year on one member of staff, which is quite eye-watering and should give people pause for thought. First of all, in light of that fact, the loose amount of regulation surrounding this, and also the fact that there is very little detail on exactly where this money does go, particularly with so much of it being spent in cash assistance.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about this in extra, because I'm quite sure Vanessa will have some comments on it. Let's move on, and thank you both for that. And we'll move on to censorship. And well, the term is censorship industrial complex or disinformation industrial complex, depending on your point of view. And the UK has there's some additional information that's come out on the way that censorship has been implemented globally, but particularly in the UK. So just remind ourselves about the what I call the government censorship network. This graphic we've been using for a few years now, which basically shows just a little bit of the infrastructure that the UK has already set up on this. We've got all the intelligence agencies on the left-hand side there, GCHQ, MI5, MI6, the Joint Biosecurity Centre. And on the right-hand side, under the Cabinet Office, we have a number of other organisations. For example, the Cabinet Office's Rapid Response Unit, which is about countering disinformation. The National Security Communications Team, 77th Brigade, we already know about. The Foreign Commonwealth Development Office's Counter Disinformation and Media Development Unit. And the DCMS, the Department of Culture, Media and Sports Counter Disinformation Unit, and the FY Clearinghouse. That we've talked about these in the past, but the Counter Disinformation Unit that's within the Department for Culture, Media and Sport has now changed its name. It's now called the National Security Online Information Team, to go alongside the National Security Communications Team. And this name change came to light following a parliamentary question by David Davis and an answer by John Whittingdale. So let's bring him on screen. And he had this to say. I just want to run through his answer here because there's a few very key points. The Counter Disinformation Unit, now called the National Security Online Information Team, he says, is focused exclusively on risks to national security and public safety. So it's not just about national security at all. It's also about what he describes as public safety. That's pretty much undefined at this point. He goes on to say, preserving freedom of expression is an extremely important principle underpinning the team's work. The government believes that people must be allowed to discuss and debate issues freely. He lies. We'll come on to explain why I say he lies as we go on here. The team does not monitor the social media accounts of individuals and does not take any action that could impact anyone's ability to discuss and debate issues freely, he said in the parliamentary statement. But of course, this is a statement, we'll come on to this in a little bit, this is a statement that the government made about 77 Brigade until such times as it turned out 77 Brigade was in fact monitoring the social media accounts of individuals, including parliamentarians. But don't worry, because Whittingdale went on to say in his parliamentary answer that when NSOIT identifies content which is within one of the areas of focus, ministers have agreed is assessed to pose a risk to national security or public safety, and which is assessed to breach the terms and conditions of the relevant platform. It may share that content with the platform. In other words, it will inform the platform that a particular tweet or post has gone up. No action is mandated by the government. He lies. It is entirely up to the platform to determine whether or not to take any action in line with the terms of service. So let's just look at whether he's telling the truth. And I've absolutely accused him of lying to Parliament on this. And the reason is this, as everybody will know by now, the Online Safety Bill is now an Online Safety Act. It is now law. And it was very clear within the bill and now the Act that online platforms are required to enforce the promises social media platforms make to users when they sign up through terms and conditions. So if he is alleging that the government is not mandating that online platforms take action when the government informs online platforms of tweets or otherwise that they believe breaks the terms and conditions, then that's simply untrue. He went on to say this: under no circumstances is content from parliamentarians or journalists ever referred to platforms. Well, as I say, I don't think we can believe that either, because 77 Brigade, the 77 Brigade case demonstrated that they lied in that circumstance. Is there any reason to believe them in this one? But the reason I highlighted or journalists, of course, there was because the other aspect of the Online Safety Act is that only certain people providing a journalist function are considered to be journalists by that, in the sense that you will have to be regulated by Ofcom if you want to be considered a journalist and have your content protected by the Act. Just to remind everybody of the 77 Brigade situation, this was January this year. And of course, Ben Wallace following a question by David Davis again, had said that he was going to investigate the situation of 77th Brigade spying domestically, which is something that government and 77th Brigade had always denied. Naturally, here we are 10 months later, and there's been no result of that investigation ever published, and we're not even clear whether that investigation happened, in fact. So who's in charge of this new group, or this newly rebranded group, I should say, because it has been in existence for a few years? It is this gent, Saqib Bhatti. He's a Conservative MP for Meriden and has been an MP continuously since the 12th of December 2019. He currently holds the government post of Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State in the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. And these are just I'll just bring four of his responsibilities on screen. First of all, online safety policy, including the National Security Online Information Team, which is what we're talking about here. The digital regulation, including the Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Bill and the Digital Markets Unit. And then he's also responsible for digital identity policy. And he's also responsible for supporting the delivery of the government's AI program in the House of Commons, including the AI Safety Institute. So this is the person you need to communicate with if you want to discuss censorship, particularly this, or at least this particular aspect of it. But let's bring this on from Substack. This is written by Michael Schellenberger, Alex Gutentag and Matt Taibbi, and it's entitled CTIL Files Number 1, US and UK military contractors created sweeping plan for global censorship in 2018, new documents show. So they're highlighting a whistleblower and a tranche of documents describing the activities of what they call anti-disinformation group called the Cyber Threat Intelligence League, or CTIL. And this was brought about following comms with the UK government, the US government, and the Department for Homeland Security in the United States. And I just want to bring this quote up from the article. Now, a large trove of new documents, including strategy documents, training videos, presentations, and internal messages, reveal that in 2019, US and UK military and intelligence contractors led by a former UK defence researcher, Sarah Jane Terp, developed the sweeping censorship framework. These contractors co-led CTIL, which partnered with CISA in the spring of 2020. In truth, the building of the censorship industrial complex began even earlier in 2018. So basically they're highlighting this lady, Sarah Jane Terp. So let's bring her on screen. This is her LinkedIn profile. She said she works on the intersection of data science, cybersecurity, and people. And her technical background includes cognitive security, information fusion, crowdsourcing, unmanned systems, including human-machine learning, data governance, nation-state development, and crisis response. So that's quite a wide-ranging scope there. But there you go. Let's bring up a different CV. This is from the Stimson website. SJ is an independent consultant applying information security practices to disinformation and other online harms. Her current focus is on risk management for cognitive and cybersecurity. Most recently, she taught at the University of Maryland iSchool and built research and tools that include the disarm, disinformation, data sharing frameworks for running and operating cognitive security operations centers. So this is the key mind behind the disinformation the censorship industrial complex in the UK. It has been exported to other countries and so on. So also on this topic, just to finish off, there's a tweet from Piers Robinson. More evidence of the role Bellingcat plays within the censorship industrial complex. And he's retweeting or quoting a tweet from Eric van de Beek, a Netherlands independent journalist, and making the point that the Bellingcat articles were being circulated within the Dutch Departments of Defense, Justice and Foreign Affairs by the Dutch intelligence agency before that article was eventually being published by Bellingcat itself. And so the implication there is a clear link between, or at least that Bellingcat seems to be operating as some kind of security agency for various governments. And since they're based in the Netherlands at the moment, the Netherlands intelligence agencies seem to be getting first dibs on it. But that also, I would imagine, is something we will discuss a little bit more in extra. So let's leave that topic there for now. if you like what the UK column does, you'd like to support us, please head over to community.ukcolumn.org. You can join us there, and your membership very much needed and appreciated. Or you could pick up something from the UK column shop. That's at shop.ukcolumn.org. But please do share anything you find on the various platforms, especially ukcolumn.org and ukcolumnextracts.co.uk. A couple of advertisements now here. At 1 p.m. tomorrow, I have done an interview on net zero and energy policy and the way net zero energy schemes with Steve Gorham, an author and campaigner on this topic. At 1 p.m. ukcolumn.org/live if you want to watch that live, and it'll be up on the website following that. A reminder that on Sunday we are hosting, on behalf of International Centre for 9/11 Justice, a short symposium. The main speaker is Daniela Ganser. It's really looking at all the post 9/11 efforts that have been justified by 9/11 itself, as the West has pushed out its war agenda internationally. So other speakers include Richard Falk, Elizabeth Woodworth, and Marilyn Langwas. And of course, Piers Robinson will be hosting that. So do join us. That begins at 6 p.m. this coming Sunday. And a final reminder, or not a final reminder because we'll do that on Friday, but another reminder that Andrew Bridgen is asking everybody to lobby their MPs to attend a meeting that he is hosting in Portcullis House on Monday, the 4th of December. And I believe that begins at 5 p.m. You can find more information at saveoursovereignty.co.uk, including a template letter that you might send to your MP. And that's that for the ad break. Now, Charles, let's move on to farming.
Farming and the production of food, specifically the often tempestuous relationship between farmers, food producers, and the distributors or the supermarkets. And this is prompted by a story in Farmers Weekly, which reports that an online petition, has now hit over 100,000 signatures and therefore can trigger a parliamentary debate. Specifically, this is to do with what's called the Groceries Supply Code of Practice. And the petition in nature really seeks to allow retailers enforce retailers to buy what they agreed to buy, to pay what they agreed to pay, and to pay on time. So just to look at the background to this and why it's come about, the petition states that almost half of a panel of 100 UK fruit and veg farmers fear they will have had to give up their farm within the next 12 months. And many raised concerns about the behaviour of supermarkets, with 69% agreeing that tougher regulations are required to redress the imbalance of power between farmers, processors, and the supermarkets. So how's this been dealt with so far in the UK? Obviously, it's a topic that's been talked about for years without much action. There's been a small amount of protest in recent weeks. In October, a couple of distribution centres were blocked by farmers, which I'll just bring on screen now. You can see the sort of slogan there, like food, need farmers. Obviously seems like a fairly obvious statement to make. But the upshot of this, and the campaign, is being run by something called the Fair to Farmers Charter, which has 5 sourcing principles. So we'll just take a quick look at those to see what they are and what ground needs to shift to make the situation better for farmers. So they want to force the distributors, the supermarkets, to buy what you committed to buy, to pay on time, to commit for the long term, to agree on fair specifications, and to pay what you agreed to pay. So it's clear from that statement that that's obviously not the case at the moment, whereas it should be. And there is an instrument that's supposed to deal with this. So we'll look at that now. There is a body, or at least an individual in place, the Groceries Code Adjudicator, and they produce an annual report and accounts. So we'll look at some of the detail from 22 to 23. And in it, we find out that the top 2 issues that concern suppliers continue to be delay in payments, 15%, and forecasting, 12%. So essentially the farmers are struggling enormously with cash flow and just the availability of the sort of contractual nature of the business they're trying to undertake with the distributors, and often being left with stock that they can't get rid of or it gets refused. And there are all sorts of other issues that are manifesting themselves. So from the report, there are several graphs that are supposed to illustrate the current situation. One that they're quite keen to put across is the suggestion that there is a downward trend in reporting of particular issues. Now, of course, statistics being what they are, there could be any number of reasons for this, not least that farmers may have lost faith in the very system that they're reporting to. There may be, in a way, a fear of repercussions from the distributors that they deal with, and other issues related to technology or various other considerations. There's one other big factor which deserves a discussion and further investigation, because one big change in the industry in terms of the direction of travel is that the suppliers that already exist, the distributors have been joined in the marketplace by Amazon. So we'll just look now at a few of the charts which give an impression of how Amazon is perceived by the suppliers it deals with. The red arrow there points to Amazon having a much, much lower score in terms of positive perception of overall retailer code compliance. The next chart says that, it states suppliers that agree retailers conduct the trading relationship fairly, in good faith, and without duress. Again, on the right-hand side of the chart, Amazon way down at 33%, below the next, which is Lidl at 58%. And then finally, the supplier's perception of change in retailer practice in the past year. Okay, we bear in mind that Amazon has only been in this game for a year, but nonetheless, its score is much, much lower than any of the other businesses within the industry. So what recourse do the farmers have? Who can they go to in order to deal with the situation? And we go back to the adjudicator. So what can the adjudicator do if indeed the code has been broken? So it says that the adjudicator can make recommendations, require retailers to publish details of any breach, and in the most serious cases, impose a fine. Well, we then go on to find out that the power to fine a retailer goes up to a value of 1% of its UK turnover, and also that it has only carried out 2 investigations since its inception some years ago, the first into Tesco in 2015 and the second into the Co-op in 2018. So go back to the direction of travel. Tesco previously was the biggest player in the game with a market capital of about 25 billion. Amazon's market capital is reckoned to be about 1.5 trillion. So the suggestion that, in effect, a one-man band outfit in the form of the Groceries Code adjudicator may be able to affect significant change seems somewhat fanciful. We'll just go back to the originator of the petition itself, a man called Guy Singh Watson, who may be a familiar name to viewers and listeners, as he's created the Riverford brand, which of course deals directly with the consumer. So his point is really that he is walking proof of the way in which this entire mechanism can be got around by dealing directly with the customer. And so therefore, if this is something that is of interest to you, first of all, I would recommend that you go and look up the petition. But also, if you happen to live near farmers that you know are struggling, then open the conversation with them and see how far you can take it in terms of dealing directly with them.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that. We'll move back to sort of international issues now. And David Cameron, of course, the new Foreign Secretary, has been over in Brussels for the NATO Foreign Ministers meeting yesterday and today. There he is, if you can see him standing beside Anthony Blinken. Don't they look like a motley crew? But anyway, this is basically what he was saying. We need Sweden now. So Cameron wants Sweden in NATO straight away as really something that needs to happen urgently. But their main thing was Ukraine. They were absolutely wanting to drum up more business for Ukraine, but also strengthening Euro-Atlantic security is what they claimed. So anyway, at the same time, at the same meeting on the sidelines, was a meeting of the joint, the JEF and the Joint Expeditionary Force, sorry, and they have decided to hold an activity, what they're calling an activity. They're calling it a critical, protecting critical infrastructure. They're calling it a critical underwater infrastructure in the region, in the Baltic, of course, because of course we weren't involved in blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline at all, and so we've now got to get the JEF out there to make sure that we can protect everything in the Baltic. But this is all about protecting all kinds of infrastructure in the Baltic. This is going to take place between the 1st and the 15th of December. And it's going to complement NATO's ongoing activities in the Baltic Sea. The question is, are they protecting stuff, or are they carrying out military operations under the guise of this kind of protection? That remains to be seen. But look, the JEF has developed what they're calling a series of response options, and this is the first one of those response options that they've actually implemented. And we'll keep an eye on what they do in the not too distant future. But coming back to the NATO conference, the Foreign Ministers Conference, Jens Stoltenberg held a press conference following that. And I just wanted to play out a few seconds of what he had to say. Oh, okay. So I do apologize. We don't have that little bit of video. But anyway, the point here is at the very end of that, he very much was stating that the NATO is about to expand into, Ukraine is about to join NATO. Ukraine is closer to NATO than ever before, was what he said. So I want to highlight this article from the UK Column website. NATO chief confirms Russia's account of Ukraine intervention amid an escalation of surrendering Ukrainian soldiers. This is by Christopher Hell. It was published on the 15th of this month. What Stoltenberg said in the press conference, basically about expansion of NATO and Ukraine joining NATO, should be seen in the context of this quote from a couple of weeks ago, where he said the background was that President Putin declared in the autumn of 2021, actually sent a draft treaty that they wanted NATO to sign to promise no more NATO enlargement. That was what he sent us, and that was a precondition for not invading Ukraine. Of course, we didn't sign that. The opposite happened. He wanted us to sign a promise never to enlarge NATO. He wanted us to remove our military infrastructure. How dare he? He wanted us to remove our military infrastructure in all allies that have joined NATO since 1997, meaning half of NATO, all the Central and Eastern Europe. We should remove NATO from that part of our alliance, introducing some kind of A and B or second-class membership. We rejected that, so he went to war to prevent more NATO close to his borders. So the claim here was, or at least the assessment of this, Charles, I don't know if you've got an opinion on this, but it seems to me that the number of deaths that we have seen in Ukraine since the war started could have been prevented if NATO had simply entered into a negotiation at that point, rather than simply, tearing up the proposal from Russia and telling Putin to go away.
Absolutely, but I think it's this sort of extension of a theme that's been running since 1990, and NATO is seemingly unable to see that through actions exactly like this, that it can quite legitimately be viewed as provocation by Russia. But unfortunately, that never seems to quite sink in.
Indeed. Now, I just wanted to end by highlighting the new Dreadnought class submarines and make a quick point about this, because £121 million, a new contract, 2 new contracts, in fact, have now just been awarded to Babcock related to the Dreadnought class builds. And this is apparently, according to the British government, going to support 250 jobs. These 2 contracts have been awarded to Babcock, as I say. And the first is 66 million. It's been awarded to provide in-service submarine support expertise in the development of the Dreadnought class submarines, and an additional another 55 million contract via BAE Systems for weapon handling and launch systems and submerged single ejector equipment for boats, 2 to 4 of the Dreadnought class. But I just wanted to make the point that in the meantime, in Devonport in Plymouth, we have a whole, believe 10 or 11 nuclear submarines, older nuclear submarines, being in the process of being decommissioned, that are sitting there with fully fueled up, and the decommissioning project is effectively stalled. So let's just, this is from Navy Lookout. This is from February 2022. Project to dismantle ex-Royal Navy nuclear submarines inches forward. It hasn't edged forward really at all. So let's just bring the names of the submarines on screen. So there are still 10 that are fully fueled sitting at Devonport. And of course, it's only a few weeks since, or a couple of months rather, since the BBC had this headline, "Minor Leak at Nuclear Submarine Dock." And people have been warning for quite some time that as these boats sit in dock rotting, that basically it's an accident waiting to happen. So I just wonder about Babcock continuing to get, huge numbers of millions of pounds of defence contracts, while this project continues to languish effectively. And maybe we need to see some movement on it. Now, just very quickly, I want to get Vanessa's comment on this because this is James Karaoke at the UN Security Council, or the UN General Assembly, rather. He's speaking about the Security Council and talking about Security Council reform. He said that since we last debated the need for Security Council reform here in the General Assembly, we've grappled with increasing conflict around the world, the impact of Russia's illegal war. We believe permanent African representation on the Council is long overdue, and we support new permanent seats for India, Germany, Japan, and Brazil. And he said we also support an expansion of the non-permanent category of membership, taking the total Council membership into the mid-20s. President, since the General Assembly last met on this topic, we reaffirm our position regarding the use of the veto. And this is really the key point, because this is why Britain is pushing so hard for reform, so-called reform of the Security Council. It's the use of the veto by China and Russia in particular. And he said, for our own part, the United Kingdom has not exercised our right to use the veto since 1989. We remain committed to not vote. We remain committed not to vote against a credible draft resolution to prevent or end a mass atrocity. And we encourage all states to join us. And the hypocrisy here is off the charts as usual, because of course, although they didn't vote against the recent motions in the Security Council with respect to Gaza, they did abstain, and they certainly did nothing to prevent the United States using its veto. They're quite happy for the United States to use its veto when it suits, but they're never happy, Vanessa, for Russia or China to use theirs.
Well, that's because basically everything that the UN Security Council is endorsing is in the favor of France, the US and the UK. So they basically have no reason to use a veto, whereas Russia and China, that are pushing back against the neo-colonialist projects, whether it's in Syria or elsewhere, do have a need to use the veto. I mean, it's kind of, UN Security Council for dummies. It's incredible that they think this argument can even gather traction. It's unbelievable.
Yes, but sticking with the UN General Assembly, we need to remind ourselves of Netanyahu's speech recently.
Yeah, so this was on the 22nd of September. I'd like to just play it again, just to start off what I'm talking about.
A few years ago, I stood here with a red marker to show the curse, a great curse, the curse of a nuclear Iran. But today I bring this marker to show a great blessing, the blessing of a new Middle East between Israel, Saudi Arabia, and our other neighbors. We will not only bring down barriers between Israel and our neighbors, we'll build a new corridor of peace and prosperity that connects Asia through the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, to Europe. This is an extraordinary change, a monumental change, another pivot of history. But I also believe that we must not give the Palestinians a veto over new peace treaties with Arab states. Sanctions must be snapped back. And above all, Iran must face a credible nuclear threat.
So, what I wanted to talk about today, Mike, you mentioned the sabotage of Nord Stream. And I believe, after listening to Robert Kennedy Jr. speaking about Israel and the fact that it is their bulwark, basically, in the Middle East and preventing the rise of the BRICS countries, and in particular Russia and China, and that includes the Belt and Road Initiative. The Gaza situation or the Palestine situation is about many things, but I think part of it is about securing monopoly for the US and their allies over energy and resource transport and supply, particularly to Europe. So what is he talking about here? In my opinion, he's talking about the Indian Economic Corridor going from Mumbai through Dubai, Riyadh, Al Haditha, Haifa, of course, in the occupied territories, to Piraeus. Now, Piraeus is interesting in Greece. We've spoken about this before, the fact that actually China has substantial investment in Piraeus and, of course, in Haifa. So what is this all about? If we look at the next slide, it shows basically Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud, US President Joe Biden, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the day of the G20 summit in New Delhi, India, September the 9th, 2023, so about 10 days or so before Netanyahu's UNGA speech. If we look at an article in the Indian media, The Week, this is, I think, dated the 24th of September, so 2 days after. A passage for India, The Week reports from Israel's Haifa port, the corridor, so they're talking about this Indian economic corridor, bypassing the Suez Canal, could change trade dynamics in the region. I think this is more viable than the Ben Gurion Canal. Having looked at that, it's met with quite a few obstacles in the past. So I think this is the more likely strategic plan. Now, if we look now at, this is basically the Levant Basin, which you can see runs from the north of Syria down to basically to Egypt, encompassing Lebanon and occupied Palestinian territories, including Gaza. The Oslo Accord in 1995, so the second Oslo Accord, gave the Palestinian Authority maritime jurisdiction up to 20 nautical miles from the coast of Gaza. In 1999, a 25-year contract, which is up this year, in 2024, with British Gas Group and the PA for gas exploration off the coast of Palestine. The Gaza Marine is 1 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, and that was discovered basically 19 miles, so within that region, and then under the control of the Palestinian Authority in 1999. The whole Levant Basin is 122 trillion cubic meters. Since 2007, of course, with the Israeli blockade of Gaza, Israel controls the offshore gas reserves. So Gaza has had absolutely no benefit from this discovery of natural gas. It's also worth mentioning that Israel has control over the Medjed oil and gas field located inside the occupied West Bank territory. So I'm going to have a quick look at this. This is the Belt and Road Initiative. And you can see, if you go to the next slide, I'll zoom in a little bit on that central area. You can see the ports of Latakia, Tartus, Tripoli, Beirut, and then going down to where I've marked the port of Haifa, which is pivotal to the Indian Economic Corridor. Now, Latakia, we'll talk about in a second. Tartus, of course, is pretty much under the control of the Russians. Tripoli is under the control of British intelligence, largely in northern Lebanon. Beirut, we know in 2020 in August, was blown up and is no longer operational. And that, of course, leaves Haifa. So let's have a look at what I was talking about regarding Latakia. I couldn't find a better map to show the M4 highway that crosses from the northeast of Syria and all those areas that are under the control of the United States occupying forces, their various proxies, Turkey and the Turkish US proxies in the northwest that you can see there in Idlib. That means fundamentally that at the moment, the area north of the M4 heading towards Latakia in that northwest section is effectively under the control of Erdogan and Turkey through its various proxy militia that control northwest Idlib. So Latakia at the moment is also out of use. If we move on also, I'll show, I missed one of the maps, but the central area of Syria, of course, is recently under attack by the ISIS proxies being directed by the United States and their allies to take control again of the gas fields in central Syria to the east of Homs. So there is a general strategy right now to prevent Belt and Road Initiative in particular. And again, remember what Robert Kennedy said in his statement about how useful Israel is precisely for doing this. In 2022, in October, so a year before Netanyahu's speech, Al Monitor obtained information from Palestinian and Egyptian officials about the success of Egyptian mediation in pushing Israel to allow the start of extracting natural gas off the coast of the Gaza Strip. And it's notable that Egypt has been, while ostensibly protesting the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza into the Sinai, it has also been instrumental in preventing humanitarian aid entering Gaza during the last 6 weeks, and also allowing people out of Gaza for humanitarian aid and hospital aid inside Egypt itself. This was an article very recently, US to push Israel on allowing Gaza offshore gas reserves to revitalize Palestinian economy. I will blatantly say that that is a lie. If we move on to the next slide of the article. So this was on November the 20th, 2023. Amos Hochstein, US President Joe Biden's energy security advisor, is currently visiting Israel to discuss preventing a second front from opening between Israel and Lebanon amid ongoing clashes with Hezbollah, as well as potential economic revitalization plans for Gaza centered around undeveloped offshore natural gas fields. Again, I will call that out as absolute bunkum. They're securing the north of Gaza and even now central and southern Gaza in order to secure the exploration rights for Gaza's gas field and actually the entire Levant gas field. Hochstein was most recently in Bahrain, where he discussed the opportunity to develop offshore gas fields on behalf of the Palestinians as part of plans for post-war Gaza that we know don't involve Palestinians at all. And of course, Bahrain has been very vocal in condemning Hamas. I can't think why. Saudi Arabia, of course, Egypt and Bahrain will be strategic partners in the economic corridor. And of course, this is one of the fears. This is the article in the Indian Express. As Israel-Hamas conflict, again, spun as Israel-Hamas rather than Israel-Arab or Israel-Palestinian, gets deadlier, what happens to the India-Europe economic corridor? So obviously they're expressing fears that the conflict could interfere with their plans for ethnically cleansing Gaza and securing those offshore gas exploration rights.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you very much for that. That was very interesting. Now, King's speech Charles was a couple of weeks ago. We did mention it, and we mentioned that one of the things on that was a Holocaust memorial bill. We didn't know the detail of it now, but we do now.
Indeed. There is quite a considerable amount of detail. And of course, the way it's been presented, or at least the way it was alluded to in the King's speech, doesn't really give any indication of the background and the controversy which has surrounded it and indeed should surround it. So we'll just look at the text from the King's speech itself. And it's a brief reference. My government is committed to tackling anti-Semitism and ensuring that the Holocaust is never forgotten. A bill will progress the construction of a national Holocaust memorial and learning centre in Victoria Tower Gardens. So it may not surprise viewers and listeners to learn that the bill, which is now up on screen, makes provision for expenditure by the Secretary of State and the removal of restrictions in respect of certain land for or in connection with the construction of such memorial. Now, this bill was introduced by Michael Gove, who is a well-known supporter of Israel and has been continuing to, in effect, bang the drum for much closer relationship between the UK and Israel. Now, the detail on this restriction in relation to certain land states that Section 8 of the London County Council Improvements Act 1900 does not prevent, restrict, or otherwise affect the carrying out of any of the activities described, which are basically the construction of the memorial. Now, the reason that that is significant is that they don't go on and clarify the situation at all or refer to what those restrictions might have meant in terms of the 1900 bit of statute. I'll just show you on the map where we're talking about, and this is just to the south of the Palace of Westminster, an area known as the Victoria Tower Garden. So the way it's been presented is, in effect, as a very new idea. And indeed, there's a government department responsible for it, the UK Holocaust Memorial Foundation, which describes that it will stand as a reminder of the horrors of the past. And in particular, concerning the location, it says the view of Parliament from the memorial will serve as a permanent reminder that political decisions have far-reaching consequences. Well, how ironic. That is absolutely true, but not probably in the manner that they intended, because in actual fact, this is not a new plan. It goes back some years and has already caused an awful lot of controversy. So we'll just have a look at exactly why that is. And it goes back to the original planning application, which was refused by Westminster Council, and that was then appealed by the government. So the Museums Association reports that the then planning minister overturned an earlier decision by Westminster Council. And the issue at stake really is that it's summed up here as being the right idea in the wrong place. So there's no suggestion that the notion of a Holocaust memorial and learning centre is an inappropriate thing to place somewhere, but not here. And the reason for that I'll come on to, but these plans go back to David Cameron's time in office in 2016, designed by a Ghanaian British architect. And it's significant to note that the planning application at the time was opposed by a number of groups, including London Historic Parks and Gardens Trust, which led the challenge, along with Save Victoria Tower Gardens, Westminster City Council, the Thorney Island Society and Baroness Deach. So not an insignificant number of people who do know what they're talking about. I'll just bring up now the small bit of legislation from 1900, just to illustrate the point that the bill in Parliament at the minute didn't actually refer to, but it refers to the creation of the land after the road to the west was built. And it says that it will be maintained in manner hereinafter provided for use as a garden open to the public and as an integral part of the existing Victoria Tower Garden. Now, again, apart from the fact that having a public space in use as a garden to the south of the Palace of Westminster is desirable and indeed was enshrined in statute that it should be protected, there are other issues at stake. They've not had very much attention in Parliament, but one Conservative MP by the name of Nikki Aiken has picked up on the sensitivities surrounding it. And she said on a debate in Parliament that the Save Victoria Tower Gardens campaign also noted the site's important legal functions and its role in protecting the Palace of Westminster World Heritage Site. We must remember that Victoria Tower Gardens is a Grade 2 listed public park. For this reason, the design of the monument and learning centre matters greatly. Historic England has raised significant concerns about overwhelming the existing monuments. The gardens have notable existing memorials to oppression and emancipation. Rodin's Burghers of Calais, the statue of the suffragette Emmeline Pankhurst, and the Buxton Memorial to the abolition of slavery. So these are significant details that have absolutely not come up in the proposal either during the King's speech or in any of the surrounding debate. But we look now at the statue of Emmeline Pankhurst herself, Due to her very determined and lengthy efforts, the vote was given to women over the age of 30 in 1918. And indeed, her statue there commemorates that event. We then come on to the Buxton Memorial. And again, probably not much known by viewers and listeners, but Thomas Fowle Buxton was a very long-serving MP who took on the abolition of slavery campaign from Wilberforce in 1825, getting it over the line, of course, for the Abolition of Slavery Act in 1833. So to consider that in 10 years' time, when the bicentenary of the abolition of slavery is commemorated, it will be asked, well, why has this park been destroyed? And indeed, to just quantify or qualify what I mean, I've just got a couple more points. One is that despite the fact the government is suggesting otherwise, there is actually already what's called a National Holocaust Centre and Museum in Nottinghamshire. It's been started by a family that were struck very much by what they found when they went to Israel on a visit. They call it Beth Shalom, the House of Peace. And they say that it holds 2 permanent exhibitions, a memorial and reflective space, education and teaching space, beautiful landscape, memorial gardens, and viewing galleries to learn about the Holocaust. So effectively, that sounds very like what's been planned for Victoria Tower Gardens. But of course, it's in Nottinghamshire and not in London. And it's as though a point needs to be made about putting this beside Parliament. There are a couple of artists' impression we'll put on screen now, just to give you an idea of the scale of the proposal, which, as you can see, the Buxton Memorial's just there on the right-hand side of the monument. As the MP Aiken said, it absolutely dwarfs it. The next slide shows the underground space with a lady there for scale. It would be an absolutely enormous construction. And so, unfortunately, what it looks very much like is that the situation in the Middle East is being exploited in order to secure political capital to force through a measure that has absolutely ridden roughshod over the democratic process, both in quashing planning decisions and also overturning court decisions. But more than that, really, it seeks to relegate the pursuit of universal suffrage and indeed the abolition of slavery as being inferior to recognition of the Holocaust.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. That is where we will end today. Thank you to Charles and Vanessa for joining us. If you are a UK Column member, we will be back in a few minutes for some extra. Otherwise, we will see you as usual on Friday at 1 p.m. But don't forget the interview going out live at 1 p.m. tomorrow in the usual places. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.